Welcome once again to my studio here on the South Shores of Boston, Massachusetts. Today's insider tip for collecting artwork is something I think we've gone over before briefly, and I want to kind of move into it in more detail today with you. That is the importance of collecting artwork that is has the proper certificate to it. An artist certificate is very important when collecting artwork. If you're collecting artwork that will grow in value. We've talked about that, I think, with my minis, which are really moving well because, first of all, they're small, hence the price point on these are very reasonable, and I'm purposely holding them at a low price point so that you can get yourself into collecting original artwork. Now, what's going to make this piece grow in value over time is the fact that it is properly documented within my studio. First of all, it's hand-signed, which is most valuable for the piece of artwork. But then there's other information on this. It has a studio registry number. Every single piece, I've mentioned this before, every single piece that leaves my studio has a registered number on it. So that down the road, when the piece needs to be checked on, is it a real Matthias Bodner? An individual could contact my studio and say, we have this piece of artwork here, and I'll say, what's the number on the piece of artwork? And I'll be able to look that up in my catalog book and say, indeed, it did come from my studio. So that will lend this piece of artwork down the road. It'll allow it to climb in value. So here's a larger piece of artwork, and this is like a case in point about proper documentation, the importance of documentation, and why this particular piece is now going to grow in value for its collector. This piece was created in 08, so it has some time behind it. One of my largest collectors purchased this piece back in 08 and had a lot of room for artwork, for the hanging of artwork. He had a ton of artwork, not only mine, but lots of others. And he is now in a position where he's decided to downsize. So he's leaving the big house that he was in, and he's found a nice, manageable condo for himself. So he has a dilemma. He's going to have to get rid of a certain amount of artwork. He just can't accommodate all this artwork. So he's approached me and has asked me to resell it for him, and I'm more than happy to do that. I do that with my collectors that I have been with for a long time. So the important aspect of this piece of artwork is the documentation that was put on it originally. So on the back, you will see it's physically hand-signed. I physically wrote the registration number on the piece itself, and that's an older certificate of authenticity back in 08. Important aspects of the certificate, all the information on the artwork is right here. Title, date, measurements. The certificate number is placed on the registry number is placed onto the certificate. The certificate is hand signed. I have also a watermark on the certificate, so if the certificate doesn't have a watermark, it's not one of my certificates. And there's a lot of general information, contact information from back then, website information, all of that. So this piece is going to grow in value now because it's going to be sold, it's going to be resold at a higher value because it shows a lot of lineage. It's not a brand new piece out the door. This has been around for a while. This piece comes from a very important time period in my artistic life when I started incorporating the New York Times into my artwork, and it's carried through ever since. But this piece is one of those pieces that mark that transition in my life as an artist. Another important point for this piece to grow in value. It's like a marker, a time period in my life when I was transforming my art into another phase of my art life. So those are, and that's all going to be documented. So this piece is actually, now that it's going to be resold, there's going to be a new certificate of authenticity issued on this piece. And that will mark everything I just explained about that piece. All that history is going to be put into their certificate so that the new buyer can see all the lineage that's happening with this incredible piece of artwork. Another important point, kind of a history marker as my life as being an artist, is my name hasn't always been the same. I started off a long time ago with my artist name being Nar. And at one point, a decision was made when I was being represented by a gallery to change my name to Matthias instead of Nar. That was a decision that I had under counsel. So, but very importantly, all those certificates have a different name on them. Uh-oh, now I have certificates saying Nar and I have certificates saying Matthias. This is kind of a small area of concern. However, again, because the certificate has a registry number from the book that is in the studio, when somebody calls the studio and says, I have this piece of artwork, we think it's a Matthias, but it's under a different name. Again, I can say, well, what is the registry number on the piece of artwork? I'll be able to look that up and say, you know what, those numbers match my studio logbook. That is one of my pieces of artwork. Now I can reissue you a new certificate of authenticity with my current name and all the backlog history on that piece of artwork. Why did I change my name? What was the rationale behind that? Just adds interest to that piece of artwork and helps lend value to that piece of artwork when it actually goes up for resale. So those are some basic but important tips for you as you become a collector of original artwork. I'll see you on my next post, probably next week. Until